And this is Ray Schillaci back with the Santa Clarita International Film Festival. And today, for my guest, I have producer-writer Dan Bronson. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Dan. After earning a doctorate at Princeton, Dan taught English and American literature at Indiana's DePauw University. His consuming passion for the movies inspired him to create a film program at DePauw and later led to an internship at Universal Studios, where his mentors included Academy Award-winning writer and director George Seaton, legendary film editor Verna Fields, famous for Jaws, and acclaimed producer-director Gilbert Cates. Now, Dan went on to a career as a story analyst at Universal, Fox, and Paramount, as associate story editor at Filmways, and eventually as executive story editor of Paramount Pictures, where he found and recommended such varied films as Witness, starring Harrison Ford, and John Hughes' Pretty in Pink. He wrote the story notes for many Paramount productions, including Top Gun, Young Sherlock Holmes, and supervised the early development of The Godfather 3, which is a story all into itself. Eventually, Jeffrey Katzenberg lured Dan to Disney, where he began a career as an independent writer-producer, working not just as Disney, but also at Interscope, Paramount, TriStar, MGM, Orion, Largo, HBO, USA, CBS, NBC, and ABC. He did uncredited work on Marley Maton's Hear No Evil and John McTiernan's Die Hard with a Vengeance. But he's best known for HBO's Ed Harris thriller, The Last Innocent Man, and NBC's Death of a Cheerleader. Dan is also an author of 2 books, Confessions of a Hollywood Nobody, and his latest is a great slice of film noir, Someone to Watch Over Me. Welcome, Dan Bronson. Hey, Dan.
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you. And Dan and I have a little association together that we have a friend of ours who was also an executive over at Fox, I believe. That was Carl Schaunzer, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And a producer.
And a producer, yes.
Starring Leslie Nielsen.
Yes. Now, I want to talk about. Let's talk about a little bit about your highest profile projects, which the first one is The Godfather 3, correct?
Yes, it has to be Godfather 3. Let me give you a little bit of background on that one. I've always felt that Godfather 1 and 2 back to back were the greatest movie ever made.
Amazing. Yes.
A Greek tragedy, just filmmaking on a colossal scale. At any rate, when I was promoted to exec story editor over at Paramount, that made me a member of the creative group, the folks who find, develop, and supervise the movies that actually get made by the studio. Well, right after that happened, an old friend of mine by the name of Tom Wright, the white guy who ended up writing the breakthrough black film, New Jack City.
Yes. Starring.
This was before that happened.
Yeah.
Tom had been working with a low-level mafioso who owned a chain of porno theaters in New York, and he was helping him write his memoir, his autobiography. And in the course of their conversations, Tom found out what the mafia had been up to in the period of time subsequent to that covered in Godfather 2. And out of that, he'd written a treatment. And he asked me to read it and then pass it on to Don Steele, who was head of production at Paramount at the time. Well, I read it and I was just knocked out. I mean, it was amazing. It had all of the universal elements of the Godfather films, the opening ceremony and the closing intercutting. I mean, everything was there. And it showed the mob, the mafia, moving into new territory, getting into drugs big time, working with the black mafia, with the Mexican mafia. It had Connie poisoning the Godfather, the new Godfather, and his son Antonio becoming the Godfather. I mean, it was just it was a knockout. So I called him up. I said, Tom, this is great, but there's no way I'm giving it to Don Steele. I'm going to take this. I'm young. I'll get this thing made for you. I promise you. And I talked well, what I did was go to each of the other members of the creative group with this thing in advance. I talked it up. I got each one of them on my side, and I got Dawn on my side, Dawn Steele. We used to call her Balls of Steel. I mean, she was one tough lady. And yeah, she got on board too. So we go to the Monday morning creative group meeting when this thing comes up for discussion. Ned Tannen, the president of Paramount, said to Don, so what did you think? And she praised it to the skies. And then the dominoes fell into position as they always did. If Don was always the first to speak, and whatever position she took, in most cases, everyone would fall into place. Well, got around to me, and naturally I praised it to the sky. And then we wait for Ned. And Ned says, well, I don't like it. It's a money pit. He said, but I'm go ahead. He says, it's your movie, you go make it. And in the context of what he just said, it's your job, you go lose it. He said,
and that's the way it works in Hollywood, right?
Oh yeah. Well, he said to me, now look, there's no way you're going to get the original cast back. I'll give you Pacino. That's it. He says, I still haven't made back Robert fucking Duvall's salary from Tender Mercies, which he supervised over at Universal. Well, so it turns out that the mafioso Tom was working with, a guy by the name of Nick Marino, felt that he should be co-author of this piece. So there's no way to say no to this guy. So I meet with him and Tom. He shows up at Paramount in a white Rolls Royce. He gets out in his ice cream suit. He's as white as he is tall, and he talks like this. Well, I take these guys into the commissary, to the garden room, where all the movers and shakers of the studio, from the president on down, are assembled over lunch. And the three of us sit and chat. And I say, look, we've gotten a green light on the script. This is a great first step. But there's one thing I got to tell you at the outset. Ned is not going to allow us to have the full cast back for the sequel. And there's silence. And he looks at me and he says, well done. You remember that line in Godfather 1 about making you an offer you can't refuse? I like ours in Godfather 3. Godfather Tree. If I can't deal with you, I'll deal with your estate. Well, he was threatening to have me rubbed out over casting. Okay, this could be an interesting experience. I hastened to tell him, I said, look, if your script is good enough, we'll get every one of them, I guarantee you. But it was a tense moment. Well, not long after that, I got the call from Jeffrey Katzenberg offering me a writing deal over a 3-picture deal at Disney, which I hastened to accept. The project was passed off to Dawn Balls of Steel. And she had a meeting with Nick Marino. And I know from her secretary at the time that she came out of the meeting white-faced. She passed the project on over to another friend of mine there at Paramount. And eventually they brought in Coppola, and he and Puzo threw out most of what Tom and Nick had done. And
what a shame.
We got the tragic mess that is Godfather 3, that actually compromises 1 and 2. So that's one of my major claims to fame. I'm the guy that gave the world Godfather 3.
Well, not in the shape that it turned into.
No, not at all.
So let's talk about, I want to talk about your book for a moment. You have a love for old Hollywood. And you wrote this fabulous book called Someone to Watch Over Me. It felt like I was watching a Bogart movie. It's so good. And tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I came up with the notion back in the late 90s. I'm a little slow to get to things. The book came out earlier this year, so you can see that I do take my time on these things. But I played for years with the idea of writing a series, a la Ross McDonald or Raymond Chandler, about a mystery series set in Hollywood. And I chose the late 40s, the post-war period, as possibly the most interesting period in the whole fascinating history of Hollywood. Because in that post-war period, the studios were at their peak of power, but there are already big cracks starting to form in the foundation. There were the Paramount consent decrees, which divorced them from ownership of the theaters. They were forced to divest themselves by the federal government of ownership of the theaters. So if they no longer had the guaranteed market, I mean,
that was to take apart
things, they bought them and sold them.
Yeah, that was to take apart the monopoly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there was also the rise of television, major competition from free TV.
Right.
And there was the breakdown of the star system. They in the past had locked these stars up. The stars were virtually indentured servants. If they refused to do what the studios wanted them to do, they would be punished severely. And there was no way. The contracts were unbreakable. Well, eventually the stars refused to sign these things. This all started happening in the late 40s. I think Jimmy Stewart was the first one to go out on his own and make something like $1 million instead of whatever he was contracted for at the studio, some much lower than that. So it was all beginning to break down. Well, there's all this conflict, and conflict is drama. So that was when I decided where I decided to set my story. And I wanted to tell the story of an actor who was just on the verge of stardom. He'd made that breakthrough film when World War II broke out. He volunteered. He saw D-Day, the Battle of the Bulge, the freeing of the death camps, and he came back physically and emotionally scarred. As a matter of fact, he has a scar that runs from here all the way back to his ear. His film career is over. The studios his studio takes pity upon him and gives him a job as a publicist. And as he says, publicist, right? So the only thing I know about publicity is how to suppress it. And that was his job. He was the babysitter to the stars. And his job was to try to control them. And when he failed, to cover up their bad behavior. And he's good at it because he simply doesn't care about anything anymore as a result of his war experiences until Savannah Stephens comes along. He is assigned the care and feeding of Savannah Stephens, who is the Hollywood, or who is Titanic Pictures sexpot star. She is heading up their biggest picture of the year, the one on which the entire fate of the studio depends. All their money is tied up in it, and she's a basket case. She shows up late to the set, if she shows up at all. She insists on dozens and dozens of takes. She's constantly on the verge of a breakdown, and then she disappears. And his job is to find her without help from anyone, because he can't tell anyone, even the police, that she's gone. It would be so devastating to the studio. So that's the setup, and it goes from there.
And what's so interesting about Dan's book is that what you've done is you've taken real life situations, you've characterized some real life stars, and you've also put in some Hollywood dirt that was for real, like that. God, what was that room? I'm trying to remember the room where the women were all gathering.
Oh, the sewing circle.
Thank you, the sewing circle.
They called themselves the sewing circle.
The sewing circle, which I never heard of before. I thought it was something elaborate that Dan made up, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And then I read up and I went, oh my God, this is for real. And all the people that were quiet lesbians, they didn't want it to be known.
Yes, the female stars who were so hot, they were cold, like Marlene Dietrich, Greta Garbo, Hattie McDaniel. She didn't fall into that category, but she was one of the. It's astonishing. And there were bisexual stars as well, but they were all members of the sewing circle.
Yeah, Katharine Hepburn as well, which I found I was surprised.
But she wasn't officially a member. Katharine Hepburn, there's all kinds of talk about her sexuality and her relationship with Spencer Tracy.
Okay.
But these others, yeah.
Yeah, that's really something. Now I wanted to ask you, as far as studio films and these independents, there is a vast difference, but also, wouldn't you say there's more quality involved with these independent films because they're trying so hard to be standalone projects?
Well, I think there often is. I mean, there are a lot of independent films that end up collecting dust in a vault somewhere,
right?
Deservedly so. But there's the thing about, and well, maybe I could give you a little bit of my own experience as an independent filmmaker who failed. We had almost a year-long writer's strike during which you were not allowed to write anything for the studios. So I did a spec adaptation of a book that I had optioned called Truants by Ron Carlson. It was something that I'd owned the option on for several years. And I sat down and wrote it in 2 weeks, just before the strike ended. And when the strike ended, I took it to Cassian Elways, a young producer who went on to do The Butler, the Dallas Buyers Club, and on. Cassian's one of the most successful producers in Hollywood today. He was just starting out in those days, but what he was doing was giving writers a chance to direct their own material for about $2.50. You weren't going to get rich doing it. You had to make your movie, and you got to make it the way you wanted to make it. That was the great strength of the independent, of many of the independent films. It could work out badly. I mean, if your financing comes from a bunch of dentists, one of whom is a huge film fan and thinks he knows everything there is to know about the movies, then you got all kinds of problems. But I had no such problem with Cassian. I was going to be backed by Robert Ellis Miller, the director of Reuben and the great Alan Arkin film. I'm drawing a blank. It doesn't matter. And I had him to back me. I had Caro Jones, the casting director of The Karate Kid, to do my casting. I had the costume designer of Total Recall. I mean, it was amazing. And they were all committing on the basis of the script. They saw what the script was and what it could be. Mm-hmm. I was talking to Ethan Hawke's agent about playing the lead role in this thing. I'd even had conversations with one of Kirk Douglas's people to play the old man in this thing. And we were about 6 weeks into pre-production when Cassian's House of Card financing collapsed. But I so believed in this and was so determined that I kept it alive. I started paying the salary of you never spend your own money if you've got a brain in your head.
I've heard that.
The first rules in Hollywood.
Yes.
I don't. I mean, I spent my own money on the option for this thing. I spent my own money on the option for Last Innocent Man, which I did get made at HBO. At any rate, I kept my production manager and my line producer, and we did all kinds of work. Oh, I forgot I also had Paul Rebell to edit. Paul had done something called The Stone Boy, and he went on to become John Frankenheimer's editor. We had this amazing team, and we were putting together this wonderful story. But, well, I kept it alive for a year, pretty much killed my writing career during that year because you got to be on the scene. And it was almost like starting all over again. But the great thing about it, and that's the moral of the story, is that with independence, you really have a chance to be in charge of your own material. You have a degree of creative freedom that you simply don't get from the studios who, especially in these corporate days, rule with an iron fist.
Yes.
Chances are you'll sell it, your project to the studio. They will let you write one revision, and then they'll turn the thing over to another writer or a whole series of other writers. You'll lose control of it completely. May not even end up with credit.
Oh, it's a shame. Really quick, something you and I talked about a little while ago, and it blew me away, was that you had recommended a great movie by Jane Campion that's on Netflix right now called The Power of the Dog with Benedict Cumberbatch. And you happened to mention something about that you were writing that way back when. And I'm like, wait a second, how old is this project? Could you just give people just an idea of what happens here with something that's so great and powerful, and no matter how good it is, it could take forever or never to get done?
Well, I didn't recommend it. I was going to be the writer doing
Right.
the adaptation.
Yes. And what year was that?
Oh, it was the mid-90s. It's a long time. Mid-90s, yeah. I had a long lunch meeting with oh damn it. Here I go again.
No, I do the same thing.
Anyhow, two brothers, Last Picture Show, Last Detail, Academy Award nominee. His brother was married to Meg Ryan.
You mean, wait a minute, Dennis Quaid?
Well, with Dennis Quaid and his brother Randy. Okay.
Okay,
yeah. Randy, I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah, I had a long meeting with Randy Quaid, who wanted to direct himself and his brother Dennis in Power of the Dog, and I was really excited. One of the biggest producers in town was the one who held the option and was going to use them, and it never happened. I frankly don't remember at this point in time. It's been too many years. What happened?
Right.
It just didn't happen. But look at where we are. Over 25 years later, Jane Campion comes along and actually gets the job done. It gets it done brilliantly. And Benedict Cumberbatch, oh my God, as far as I'm concerned, he's the guy who should walk away with the Oscar this year.
Okay.
But it gives you some sense of how hard it is. I can tell you about projects that I worked on for 10 years and finally just went away. You've got to be totally committed. You got to be a little bit nuts to be in this business, because it's so damn tough, and the rate of success is so small. So
I know, and it's so daunting. And I've experienced it. You've experienced it, and yet there's still people trudging along and doing things like this festival here, and they have high hopes, and they can have some great films. But you just don't know. It's a big roll of the dice, is it not?
It is.
Yes. Well, Dan, I want to thank you for your time, because your time is precious. And please, let's plug your book again. Actually, let's plug both books.
Oh, okay. Well, Someone to Watch Over Me.
Okay. And where can it be found? On Amazon?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can order it from your local bookstore. They won't have it in stock, but all of them can order it. Let's see.
I didn't mean for you to travel.
How's this?
There we go. Confessions of a Hollywood
Nobody. It's a comic memoir of my roller coaster ride through Hollywood. So they're very different. One is well, there's a lot of comedy in Someone to Watch Over Me, but
there is
at the same time. And I've gotten an amazing response to both of them. I'm particularly proud of the comparisons that so many people have made to classic film noir. Phil Margolin, who's had something like 23 New York Times best-selling mysteries, said, reading Someone to Watch Over Me is like watching The Big Sleep or The Maltese Falcon. And as a matter of fact, I know of one individual, I'm looking at him at this very moment, compared it to Chinatown. And I got to tell you, that's one I'm really proud of.
Yeah, I couldn't help it. I could not help it. I read it and I absolutely loved it. That is not because you're a friend of mine. It's because you're a truly amazing writer, and I enjoyed every moment of it. In fact, I went back and reread some chapters that I was just like, oh, this is so good. And I wish this would be on film. We were talking about who could star in it, and all we could think of at that time was the old stars.
Yeah. Oh, Robert Mitchum's my choice. Yeah.
Oh,
but he's
my God.
unavailable.
Yeah. What a shame. But listen, can they find you on the web, or do you have something?
Yeah. I've got two. One is dan-bronson.com.
Okay.
And the other one is Hollywood-nobody.com. And they're very different. The Hollywood Nobody one is as much fun as the book, I think. It's very unconventional, and gotten a lot of nice comment about it.
Okay, well, Dan.
And, you can go there and buy the book too. It just transfers you over to Amazon.
Okay, so you have a great holiday season, and I really appreciate you for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot. It's always fun. we could go on and on.
I know we could. You take care, Dan.
Okay, thank you, Ray.
Give your wife my best.
I sure will.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.